What's up, everyone? I wanted to talk for a moment about music and sound. Originally, this video was going to be about frequencies and how they reach our ears and why we have... I guess if you're a musician, if you don't understand harmonics, then you won't know where I'm coming from. But, the idea that, the reason why we have harmonics, which is, the same note but at a different scale, is because we have standing waveforms, if you will. The waveforms interact with one another and they cross each other, and they don't cancel each other out. That's what like noise canceling headphones do, but they actually reinforce each other in a way that is very difficult to explain or understand. Now, in the musical world, we wonder why are there 7 notes, and did this septenaries, they call sets of 7 septenaries, and how we have many of them, and they ask, what is this a natural phenomenon? Why is it in, groups of 7? And people start asking further, well, why does music use the notes it uses? And why do we use A, B, C, D, E, F, G? And why don't we use, different frequencies, if you will? So if I'm going to talk about frequencies, I should talk about hertz, because all of the frequencies that we use are based on hertz, and the hertz are vibrations or oscillations per second. So 20 hertz is 20 oscillations per second. And a few years back I got really into Cymatics. Cymatics is how you can just look it up, Cymatics. It shows how on a plate of sand, I'm sure you've probably seen this, you play a certain frequency and the sand will actually morph into a very specific geometrical shape. And when you change that frequency and raise it up to a higher pitch, say 20, 30, 40,000 hertz, they will take on different shapes. And the idea is this, that sound can create structure. The sound can actually affect the way that water behaves, the way that materials behave. I mean, this is proven through cymatics. As to how far we can carry that, it's difficult to say. People want to say, well, cymatics is the hidden language of the universe. And others say, well, it comes down to solfeggio, which are considered sacred tones. Now, I'm not going to go too far into solfeggio, but I'll just tell you this. I spent about 1.5 years really interested in this after I discovered cymatics. And I said, okay, solfeggio claims to be sacred tones. For example, they claim that standard tuning for like A is, I think, 440 hertz. That's 440 oscillations per second. And what a lot of folks claim is that the original note was 444 hertz. I believe is what I think that's what it was. There's a whole series of it, 512, I think, 624, I can't remember the specific numbers, but that each one of these is supposedly a hidden tone. To condense this, people believe that it was a conspiracy from the Catholic Church to hide the original tones, which were used in the Gregorian chants. To hide these tones because they put us more in touch with God, more in touch with the universe, yada, yada, yada. And how, there's a giant conspiracy now to keep music, keeping people in their dark mind. Now look, I'm not going to lend any credibility to this theory, and I'm not going to sit and just bash on it either. But the idea that you can tell someone what the original frequencies were using hertz, the measurement which we use to measure frequencies, does not work, because hertz were not invented until centuries after the Gregorian chants. So centuries after these biblical texts or ancient writings about these mystical tones, we started using hertz. My point being that in modern day, unless you can hear the sounds of what the ancients were using, we can never know for sure. And we don't know what they were going on, what natural, in other words, where do the original tones come from? How do we know which tones to use? We know what sounds good together, and it has to do with those standing waveforms. And, 5/8 and 3/8 and different mathematical equations within music that I won't even pretend to understand. But the idea that we understand which tones are which from ancient times, and that we're hiding in some, new suppressed reality, it really has no credibility that I could find. I looked a long time, and people talk a lot about retuning their guitars. Entire bands and musicians have retuned all their instruments to this, 444 tuning or whichever it is. And hey, if it sounds good, I say go for it. But I also say that we have observed nature. We can listen to the birds. We can listen to the animals. We can repeat those tones. They're really, it's limitless. We're not looking for specific tones. We're looking for tones that work together in a system. The simplicity of playing a 6-string guitar with 6 strings on it, E, A, D, G, B, E. The high and the low strings are always, harmonics of each other. It seems like a simple enough thing until you really consider somebody had to come up with, discover which music sounded good together, put these things together in these simple instruments with octaves and frets and interchangeable chords. And I play guitar, so I understand how deep it goes. I never took any music theory, but I understand the depth of music a little bit more through cymatics and through frequencies and hertz and how these things interact with us. So which brings us to, I guess, the main subject that I really wanted to talk about, which was how today's music affects us in a negative way. There was a couple things I wanted to go over. I'm not going to be that old guy that says the music today, oh, these kids today. No. A lot of the music today is really completely fucking trash. It is garbage. Using Autotune on endless R&B songs or, pop songs, Autotune is horrible. I mean, it sounds like total shit, but people think that it sounds good. But the issue isn't even how it's changed over to sampling other people's stuff and rappers sampling rappers. I grew up in the 80s. I listened to NWA. I listened to a lot of music that sampled the first rap that sampled older songs. And even back then, there was a whole thing about how, oh, this is garbage. They're just stealing other people's music. But today, that's considered like classic rap. We understood that they weren't trying to write new music. They were trying to spit lyrics. And those lyrics went over the top of whatever they could come up with that they thought sounded good and would bring up the idea. If you have when you do use an old rock song and you can use the meaning behind it as a way to convey what you're trying to say in your rap or otherwise, I won't go into detail on that. But what's happened today is that it's not about the people and what they have to say anymore. It was never and I'm just saying in rap specifically, groups like this really grew up in hard times. NWA, they had some fucked up times in Compton, and they wrote about it. They rapped about it. They had all kinds of problems bringing their, imagine singing "Fuck the Police" in the 80s. I mean, that was a big thing back then, and it wasn't that they really, it was that they were speaking out against the issues that they'd faced. And in much of today's rap and R&B, it's become about the chains. It was always that way, but it's become more about how the image of the individual is than helping the community, helping one another, giving back. And wrapped up within all the garbage music today, there are some great musicians. There's some phenomenal rap artists, R&B, jazz, you name it. But the point isn't whether good music still exists, or how subjective that is, and whether you can judge what good music is. But there's two things: how it's processed and the way that the marketing is done. It's a matter, when I was a kid, if you heard a song on the radio, you went out and you bought the tape. And when you bought the tape, you just hoped you liked more than one song on it. And more often than not, you'd get it home and you'd find out that a lot of it sucked, and only a couple songs were really good on the album. But you'd listen to it over and over and build a relationship with song after song after song in the order that they came. Nowadays, you download a song, you maybe get a couple sound bites, or you can pick and choose which parts, and nobody really is putting together albums in a way where it's, a creative story. But I'm getting kind of off track here. I'm trying not to dismiss music. It's not just about the music itself or what they're saying. It's often how it's produced. And this is what develops listening fatigue. So to put it simply, listening fatigue is any time where you have headphones in especially, and you're listening to music for a long period of time, and all of a sudden you realize that it's annoying to you, and you just can't listen to it anymore. Even if you turn it down or try to change music, you're just done. You need some quiet time. This is partially caused by what they call the acoustic reflex in your eardrum. When your ear hears loud sounds, what it will do is it will actually dampen. It's a self-protective measure for the ear. But the thing is, the eardrum still continues to vibrate with the music. So you're shutting down the way you receive it, but the eardrum's still vibrating. You are basically diminishes the sound and can cut what you're hearing by up to 50%. So naturally, people turn it up. And this is why you get this annoying message on your phones and pads that say, "Are you sure you want to turn it up past this level? Long-term damage to the ears." And people say, "Fuck you, this is my ears, I can do whatever I want." It's not even loud. More often than not, it really is. So here's the thing. You turn on the loudest music in the morning on your headphones, first thing in the morning when it's quiet. Put your headphones in, crank it up to full blast, right to where it gives you that warning, and turn it on. And tell me that's not loud. It is. It's that our ears eventually, build a tolerance to it. As a musician, I played live shows, and even those small live shows were too loud. I would walk out like, huh? I went to plenty of concerts when I was a kid where I didn't wear earplugs. I do not go to a concert these days without at least toilet paper in my pocket to put a little bit in there to dampen that, because loud music's great. Long-term hearing is much more important. And so I guess I'm giving the old man message, to the kids of today. Put in your earbuds. Don't worry if you look like an idiot. You'll look like an idiot when you're going, huh, at 60 years old. Much more than being the guy at a concert wearing earplugs where people might think, "Fuck, I should wear those." And this has changed, because today when I go to events, festivals, concerts, there's always there are several, I think it started with what was it, rock medicine. It's where, for rockers, bands, where they have these, a place where it's kind of donation funded, if you will, where people can go get earplugs. These days it's condoms, literature, safe drug information, anything you can imagine. There are several groups that do this. Bunk Police is one that has free drug testing and stuff. And so it's bringing into the light the fact that people are becoming more aware of their consumption of taking care of themselves, and your hearing and music is a big part of that. I like all styles of music. I pretty much everything except most pop. I really don't like country at all because I can't relate to it. But people will say, "You don't like Johnny Cash?" I'm like, that is completely different. I could also say I don't like rap. I don't, but I do like some rap, and I still listen to Eminem, and I still enjoy NWA sometimes to this day. But many of the rougher lyrics and senseless, mindless stuff that I used to listen to, I've definitely grown away from, and realized that a lot of it wasn't even that I agreed with the music or the lyrics. It was that it gave me a feeling. ICP is that way. Insane Clown Posse. I know a couple of my subs out there are, fans of the Hatchet Club there, and the idea that ICP has always been just this brutal, mess of blood and guts, and they're just giving an extreme case of everything, but then they go on and say, "Oh, well, it's all in good fun." I used to buy into that because I enjoyed listening to it. It was funny, some of the lyrics, and nowadays I'm just, why? But respecting and understanding why people still do. If you're at a time in your life where you have to listen to people talk about chopping other people up with hatchets, even as a joke, it's kind of like, okay, great when you're young, but time to move forward. Not that I think the ICP fans really want to kill anybody, of course not. Which was interesting because there was that Juggalo March out in Washington, D.C. recently where, they were upset because ICP fans have actually been labeled as a potential, domestic terrorist group, if you will. Because, well, I won't get into that one. That's a completely different story altogether. But I'm getting off track, if there was a track. My point being that to each his own, and it's really important for us not to point at somebody and say, you listen to that, you're an idiot. You know, just because I don't like country music doesn't mean I think that it sucks. If I grew up in the country, I'd probably love it. And it's the same way I feel about the wannabe R&B and rap of today. If I'd grown up in the inner city and I'd faced those things, then that might resonate with me. But the truth is, I don't even think most of these guys resonate with their own people that they grew up with in their own communities, because, you know, bragging about, you know, you grow up poor, you talk about how bad your community is, and then you brag about how many millions you just throw around on champagne and cars and gold. What kind of stupidity is that? And I mean, this is just beyond comprehension to me. It's complete ignorance. All of them bought into it. You know, I love Eminem. He's a great rapper. But even he is, you know, has to play a role, and I think a lot of musicians have to play that role. But, so I've rambled about music a little bit, and I've rambled about hearing a little bit, cymatics and standing waves and fun things like that. What fascinates me the most about music, or about frequencies or notes, tones, is that when they're crossed, when they're mixed, if you have more than one tone, they can create some very interesting, acoustic, they could be used as weapons. I kind of wanted to throw that in, actually. If you haven't heard about the issue going on in Cuba, this has been going on for about a year now, I think. In Cuba, American people at the embassies and the emissaries, whatnot, have been having mysterious, unexplained effects by some sort of a frequency device. Basically, they will hear a sound in their heads, some of them, and some won't. And it will cause them headaches. Some of them have permanent hearing loss. Some of them think they might have permanent brain damage from it. I think there were something like 15 to 20 officials affected by this, and it was only American officials on Cuban soil. And the U.S. made a big deal about this. It's not really in the media, but AP is talking about it, of course. They pulled out, you know, like half of the Americans there, and they actually kicked out some Cuban diplomats from Washington, D.C. Basically, it's like, we're angry because we don't know what's happening, so we're saying, it's all your fault, Cuba. You should be fixing this problem. But Cuba's not taking responsibility. They're like, hey, we don't know what the hell you're talking about. What they believe it is some sort of a sonic weapon. And people have talked about these for years. I mean, we all know about the LRAD, which is the device they point at, like, protesters, which will, you know, send a loud, very annoying sound, which will make you want to leave. But this is different. This was coming from inside their heads. This was like a very specific honed-in device that was happening to people in their homes, but only in one room of that home. And other people couldn't hear it in the room. And so they're not sure if it's a beamed device or whatnot, but it really got me thinking about, you know, they played the sound now. They just released it the other day. And it sounds just like, kind of like fingernails on a chalkboard. And it reminds me, just thinking about that gives me the shivers. The nails on a chalkboard. And I'm sure you're feeling the same way. If you're, you know, I don't even generally respond to that kind of stuff, but just thinking about it. And there was a question years ago about why certain sounds give us the creeps. And why we, you know, get chills and goosebumps when we hear that sound. Sounds like it. Theories ranged from, you know, it activating parts of our brain to saying that it sounds like a crying baby or the screaming baby, and that we are programmed to react quickly to a screaming child. So that's why we freak out when we hear screaming or certain squealing sounds. But I don't know the real answer to that question. I don't think anybody does. It's just, but the thing that was in my mind about it was the fact that screeching a chalkboard is so many different tones at once. It's almost like maybe your brain's just trying to make sense of the different frequencies, because it really is a very distinct sound. I've heard squealing trains going down the tracks. They're just screech, screech, pumping out several different sounds, you know, as they pass by, and loud, and I've never got that feeling from that. But a person could even think about scratching a chalkboard, and it would trigger that reflex. That, to me, is pretty amazing. I suppose I shouldn't leave without saying something about AMSR. I haven't looked at that in a couple of years. If I'm not mistaken, it's something like Automated Meridian Stimuli Response. It's basically an automatic body response to whispering and soft sounds. So if you've never heard of it, it's pretty fucking funny, actually. There are several videos that are AMSR videos on YouTube where it's just some girl whispering into a microphone and touching the microphone. Most of the ones that I've seen show that there's a hell of a lot more going on than just sound. It's you know, but for some people it is just sound. There's even people who have videos of crinkling of candy bar wrappers where they just open packages. It's really weird. It's really weird. Some people have a reaction to it and some people don't. But they're very soft, subtle sounds. Shows that with the chalkboard idea shows it's not the amplitude of the sound, but rather there are things going on in our brains that react to frequencies the way we don't understand, and the combination of certain frequencies can actually cause very interesting patterns in, say, sand or in water, like in cymatics. I realized that light waves, wave particle duality, whatever you want to call it, that other types of waves, energy waves, are different than sound waves. The analogy of sound waves is used to apply to those to better understand other types of waves. And even though sound waves travel through the medium of air or water and can't travel through space, these other waves can. And the question becomes, can different amplitudes of sound or different frequencies combine to create an effect that can harm someone? Well, it appears to be so, because this is what's happening in, say, Cuba. And there are several other weapons that will probably do the same thing. But then you've probably heard of the brown note. Who knows? I won't even get into that. But it makes you wonder, if there are sounds that can damage, there are most likely sounds that can heal. And this is where Cymatics wants to get into the idea that if it's affecting water, if we can have sound affect water at certain frequencies, it's obviously affecting the water within our body too. It's obviously affecting us. And some people say, well, there's a 528 hertz is the frequency to heal DNA. And I say, well, prove it then. Do it. It's not a matter of, trying to convince anyone else. It's like, get this shit done. Do some studies, show your work. Because there's too many claims about, from either end about sound, or energy. And I think understanding these waves as being, understanding the peaks and troughs in the standing waveform and trying to correlate that with, why we're affected the way we are. Because everything is a matter of energy. Everything is oscillating. Everything is vibrating. And so, ramble for the morning. Anyway, have a good one, everybody, and stay safe and check out some cymatics. Peace.